Put the money in the bag, both of you, right now. Don't make this into something you can't walk back from. The gun was shaking. That was the first thing Megan Carter noticed. Not the barrel pointed at her face, not the shouting, not the sound of 40 men going completely, utterly silent. She noticed the trembling hands holding the weapon, and she thought these boys have no idea what room they just walked into. If you've never seen 40 Hells Angels go quiet at the same time, you don't know what silence can do to the air in a room. It doesn't feel like peace. It feels like the moment before a storm decides what it wants to destroy. Before we go any further, if stories like this are what you live for, hit that subscribe button right now and follow this one all the way to the end. Drop your city in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The Coyote Ridge Diner sat 12 miles outside Flagstaff, Arizona, on a stretch of highway that the GPS forgot and truckers remembered by feel. It wasn't the kind of place you found by accident. You found it because somebody who'd been there before told you about it, told you about the coffee that tasted like it had been brewed sometime around the Korean War, and never stopped about the pie that Darlene Purcell had been making from the same recipe since 1987, about the way the booths held you like they'd been shaped specifically for tired human bodies. It was that kind of place, the kind that felt permanent, the kind you assumed would outlast everything. On a Thursday night in late October '41, motorcycles sat in the parking lot outside the Coyote Ridge. Most of them were Harleys. All of them were clean. The men who rode them had spent the day doing a charity run for a children's hospital in Flagstaff, a ride they'd done every year for the past 9 years, raising money, shaking hands, letting kids with bald heads sit on their bikes and grin for photographs. Every year they finished the same way. They came to Coyote Ridge. They ate whatever Darlene put in front of them. They drank coffee until the coffee ran out, and they talked the way men talk when they've spent a full day reminding themselves why the world is worth protecting. Megan Carter had been working the late shift at Coyote Ridge for 11 years. She'd seen a lot of things in that diner. She'd seen a man propose to a woman who said no, and then watched both of them sit in silence for 40 minutes before the woman said yes. She'd seen a trucker have a heart attack in booth 7, and she'd kept him alive with chest compressions until the ambulance came. She'd seen the Hells Angels chapter come through every October for 9 years running, and she knew every one of them by name, by usual order, by whether they took sugar. She knew Jack Morrison took his coffee black and his pie apple. She knew Danny Reeves always ordered the same thing, scrambled eggs and wheat toast, no matter what time of day it was, no matter what was on the specials board. She knew these men. She trusted them the way you trust a foundation. You don't think about it. You just know it's holding. That night, she was moving fast. The diner was packed, all 14 booths full. The counter lined the air thick with the smell of coffee and cigarettes from outside and the low sound of 40 men talking at once. It was controlled chaos, the kind she was good at. She had 2 other waitresses working with her, Brianna, who'd been there 3 years, and a new girl named Sadie, who was still learning which booths had wobbly legs. Megan was carrying 4 plates on her left arm and a coffee pot in her right hand when the feeling hit her. She'd had the feeling before. She didn't know what to call it exactly, not intuition, not fear, something quieter than both of those. A kind of tuning, like the frequency of the room shifted by half a degree and her body registered it before her brain caught up. She set the plates down at table 9. She refilled Danny Reeves' coffee without him asking, and she looked toward the door. 2 young men came in at 9:47. She noticed them because of what they weren't doing. They weren't looking for a seat. They weren't scanning the specials board. They weren't doing any of the things people do when they walk into a diner expecting to eat. They were doing something else entirely. They were assessing. They were counting. Their eyes went around the room in a specific way, fast calculating, tracking exits and occupied tables in the distance between people. The taller one, broad-shouldered, maybe 22, wearing a gray hoodie with the hood pushed back, kept his right hand in his front pocket. His jaw was set. His breathing was controlled, which told Megan he'd been rehearsing this, talking himself into it on the drive over. The other one was shorter, thinner, younger looking, maybe 19 or 20, and he was failing at calm. His eyes were moving too fast. His left knee was bouncing, even though he was standing still. Megan stood 4 feet from the counter and didn't move. The taller one, she would later learn his name was Ethan Parker, pulled the gun first. It was a 9mm, she thought, though she wasn't certain, and it didn't much matter. What mattered was that he raised it, pointed it at the ceiling, and shouted two words, "Everyone freeze!" The diner froze, but not the way he expected. When a room full of civilians hears a gun and a shout, they scatter in their minds. First, the body goes rigid, but the brain goes to panic, to flight, to the animal place, where survival overrides everything. You see it on faces. The eyes go wide. The mouth opens. The hands come up in a gesture that means please, 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 bye. None of that happened. What happened instead was this 40 men who had spent decades operating in situations where panic gets people killed, looked at Ethan Parker and his gun, and they went completely professionally, still. Not frozen. Still. The way a predator goes still. The way a man goes still when he already knows the outcome of what he's watching and he's simply waiting for it to arrive. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Ethan felt it. Megan watched his face register it, a flicker quickly suppressed, but there. His partner Tyler Brooks felt it too, and he wasn't as good at suppressing it. Tyler had his own gun out now, a smaller pistol, and he was swinging it in a slow arc, like he was trying to cover the whole room, which was both tactically useless and genuinely dangerous. A nervous man with a gun in a room he doesn't understand is the most dangerous kind. "I said freeze," Ethan said again, louder this time, and there was something in his voice that wasn't quite command anymore. It was closer to a question. Nobody moved. Nobody reached for anything. Nobody ran. They just watched him. Jack Morrison was in the corner booth on the left side of the diner, the one closest to the kitchen door. He was sitting with Danny Reeves and two other men, Tom Garrett and Phil Ochoa, both of whom had been riding with the chapter for over 20 years. Jack was 53 years old, 6'1", and built like a man who had done hard physical things his entire life without stopping. His gray beard was close-cropped. His hands were wrapped around his coffee cup. He hadn't stopped drinking his coffee. He hadn't put the cup down. He sat there in the corner of that booth and drank his coffee and watched Ethan Parker the way you watch a vehicle coming toward you, on an icy road, calm, reading it, calculating exactly when to move and in which direction. Danny leaned slightly toward him, voice barely above a breath. "How you want to play this?" "Let it breathe," Jack said. "The kid with the small gun is going to hurt somebody by accident." "I know. That's why we let it breathe." Ethan was moving through the room now, making his way toward the register at the counter. Tyler was staying near the door, still swinging that pistol, and every rotation it made caused 3 or 4 people in his arc to track it, with their eyes in the specific way men track a weapon that might go off without intention. Megan didn't move from where she was standing. She put the coffee pot down on the counter, slowly, deliberately, so nobody could mistake the motion for anything else, and she stood with her hands at her sides. "You," Ethan pointed the gun at her. "Open the register." "Okay," she said. "I can do that." Her voice was steady. She was proud of that later. It didn't feel like bravery in the moment. It felt like the only useful thing she could do, which was to not add chaos to a room that already had plenty. She moved to the register. She opened it. There was $342 in it. Ethan looked at the drawer and something shifted in his face. She saw it clearly, a small crack in the performance he'd been maintaining. He'd expected more. Whatever he'd been planning for, whatever math he'd been running, the number in front of him wasn't it. "That's it," he said. "It's a Thursday night," Megan said. "We do most of our cash business on the weekends. The rest goes into the safe in the back at 8 o'clock every night." "Then get the safe." "I don't have the combination." That was true. Darlene kept the combination. Darlene was in the kitchen, and Megan could hear the sound of the kitchen going completely silent back there. Darlene and the 2 cooks frozen, listening. Ethan stared at her. He was reassessing something. She could see it happening, the plan colliding with reality in real time. "What's back there?" he demanded, gesturing toward the kitchen door. "Kitchen." "Darlene, who owns the place. 2 cooks. They're not armed. They're just scared." She paused. "Like you." He didn't like that. "Don't tell me how I am." "I'm not trying to provoke you. I'm trying to help you think clearly." "I don't need your help thinking." "Okay," she said. "Then think clearly on your own and look at the room you're standing in." It was a gamble. She knew it as she said it. But something about his voice, the way the confidence in it was thinning, the way the original plan was already coming apart in his hands, told her he wasn't completely lost yet. He was scared and he was desperate and he was doing something very stupid, but he hadn't yet become unreachable. Ethan Parker turned and looked at the room. He actually looked at it. And Jack Morrison, still in his corner booth, still holding his coffee, met his eyes. There was a long moment. Megan counted it in her breathing. 1 breath, 2, 3. "Son," Jack said. His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't hard. It was the kind of voice that doesn't need volume to carry. "I want you to understand something before this gets away from you. There are 43 people in this room who have made it through things you don't want to imagine. Some of them have been shot at. Some of them have done time. Some of them have buried people they loved and kept writing it anyway." He paused and he took a slow sip of his coffee. "None of them are scared of you. I need you to understand that clearly because I think you came in here believing that the gun was going to do a particular job. And right now you're realizing it's not doing that job. And the next decision you make is going to matter a great deal." The room was so quiet that Megan could hear Tyler's breathing near the door, shallow and fast. Ethan's gun arm hadn't lowered, but the hand holding it had changed. The knuckles weren't white anymore. "Who are you?" Ethan said. "Jack Morrison. I run the Flagstaff chapter." He said it without pride, just fact. "I've been coming to this diner for 9 years. Megan over there makes the best coffee in northern Arizona, and she has never deserved to have a gun pointed at her. Your friend near the door is going to hurt somebody by accident if he doesn't calm his breathing down. And you came in here for something. I'd like to know what it actually is." "We came for the money." "No," Jack said. "You came in here for $342 and whatever's in the safe, which you don't have the combination for. That's not money. That's a federal charge and a ruined life." He set his coffee cup down. "You didn't drive 12 miles outside of Flagstaff on a Thursday night to a diner you obviously didn't scout properly for pocket change. So what did you actually come here for?" Tyler's voice came from the door. "Ethan." It was barely a word, just a name carrying a warning. Ethan didn't look away from Jack. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Maybe not," Jack said, "but I'm the only one in this room who's offering you a conversation instead of the 12 other options I'm not going to describe right now." He laced his fingers together on the table. "So talk to me. What's actually going on?" The silence stretched. Megan could feel everyone in the diner making the same calculation she was making, the question of whether Ethan Parker was going to make a smart decision or a terminal one. Brianna, the other waitress, was standing behind the counter to Megan's left. Megan caught her eye and moved her chin slightly downward. "Stay still, don't move. Let it go." Brianna gave the tiniest nod. She was steady. "Good." Danny Reeves shifted in the booth and Jack touched his arm without looking at him. The touch said not yet. Danny went still again. Ethan Parker lowered the gun by about 6 inches. It wasn't down, but it wasn't aimed at anyone's face anymore. "You can't help us," he said. And the way he said it, the flatness of it, the exhaustion embedded in 7 words told Megan everything she needed to know about how long these 2 boys had been carrying whatever they were carrying. "Let me be the judge of that," Jack said. "Sit down." "I'm not sitting down. I didn't say you had to put the gun away. I said sit down." Jack nodded toward the booth across from him. "You want to hold the gun? Hold the gun. But you're on your feet and you're burning through your adrenaline, and in about 4 minutes, they're going to start shaking whether you want to or not. Sit down, talk to me. I've got nowhere to be." Ethan looked at the booth. He looked at Jack. He looked at the 40 men between him and the door, all of whom had gone about as still as stones in a river. He sat down, not across from Jack, 2 booths away at an angle where he could see both the door and the corner. He chose it deliberately. Jack noticed that, and the corner of his mouth moved in something that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't not one either. Tyler made a sound from the door. "What are you doing?" "Just give me a second. We need to go. We need to go right now." "Tyler." Ethan's voice had changed. The performance was gone. What was left sounded much younger. "Just give me 1 second. Tyler didn't move, but he stopped swinging the gun. He pressed his back against the door and held it at the side and breathed. Megan realized she'd taken 3 steps toward the coffee pot without deciding to. She picked it up. She looked at Jack. He gave her the smallest possible nod. She walked to Ethan Parker's booth. She put a coffee cup in front of him. She poured coffee into it. He stared at her like she'd done something incomprehensible. "You're pouring me coffee," he said. "That's what I do," she said. He looked down at the cup. He put the gun on the bench beside him, not away, not disarmed, but down flat, not in his hand. He picked up the coffee cup with both hands. He was 22 years old, and he looked in that moment about 16. "How do you know we won't hurt anyone?" he said. "I've been in this diner for 11 years, Megan said. "I know every kind of person who walks through that door. I know the ones who came to eat, and the ones who came to take, and the ones who came because they didn't know where else to go." She looked at him steadily. "You don't want to hurt anyone. You're desperate. There's a difference, and I've learned to see it." "You don't know what desperate is," he said, and again the exhaustion in it hit her somewhere behind her sternum. "Tell me," Jack said from the corner booth. Ethan Parker wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. He looked at Tyler near the door. Tyler gave him a fractional, miserable shrug, the shrug of someone who has run out of objections. Ethan started talking. He talked slowly at first. Then he talked faster, the words coming out in a current, like something that had been dammed up for a long time and finally found the crack. He and Tyler had grown up together on the west side of Flagstaff. They'd both done small-time stuff in their late teens, nothing serious, the kind of thing that leaves a record and a lesson. They'd cleaned up. They'd been working, Ethan at a warehouse, Tyler doing mechanic work at a shop off Route 89. They'd been doing okay. Not great, but okay. Then Tyler's family had money problems. Their father had gotten sick, medical bills, missed payments, the particular American catastrophe that doesn't make the news because it happens 10,000 times a week. Tyler had borrowed money from a man named Victor Moreno. Victor Moreno was not a bank. Victor Moreno was not a loan company. Victor Moreno was a man who operated in the gaps between legitimate finance and outright extortion, and the interest he charged was the kind that could not be paid. It was designed that way. The debt was supposed to be permanent. The leverage was the point. When Tyler couldn't pay, Victor Moreno had sent people to make a different kind of argument. And when that argument didn't produce money, Victor had shifted his attention to the thing Tyler actually cared about. Tyler's younger sister, Cassie, was 17 years old. She'd been approached. She'd been followed. She'd been told in terms that were not subtle that there were other ways for the family to satisfy the debt. Ethan's voice went flat when he got to that part. Not flat like indifferent. Flat like the voice of a man who has been so angry for so long that anger has burned down into something colder and harder. "So that's what this is," Ethan said. "We need $12,000 in 72 hours, or he does something to Cassie. That's it. That's the whole thing. I know it was stupid. I know this was not. I know what this looks like. I know we walked into the wrong place." He looked at Jack. "But we were out of options, and Tyler's sister is 17, and we didn't know what else to do." The diner was completely silent. Jack Morrison looked at Ethan Parker for a long time. He looked the way people look when they're doing real thinking, not performing thought doing it. "What's the man's name again?" Jack said. "Victor Moreno." Jack looked at Danny Reeves. Danny looked back at him. Neither of them said anything. But something passed between them. A recognition, a calibration. The kind of communication that happens between men who have known each other long enough that words are optional. Megan stood at the edge of the booth and felt the room shift again. Not like it had shifted when the boys walked in, not the drop temperature shift of danger registering. Something else. Something she'd felt before in 11 years of working this diner in this life. In the moments when things that look like chaos start almost imperceptibly to organize themselves into something purposeful. She picked up her coffee pot. She refilled Jack's cup without being asked. Outside in the parking lot, 41 motorcycles sat in the October dark patient as horses. The highway ran 12 miles back toward Flagstaff, empty in both directions, the kind of silence that only exists that far out from a city. Inside the Coyote Ridge Diner, Ethan Parker sat in a booth with a cup of coffee and an empty gun hand, and Jack Morrison leaned forward with his elbows on the table, and the conversation that was about to happen was not the conversation either of those young men had driven out there to have, but it was the one they needed. Tom Garrett from the booth behind Jack spoke quietly. "You know that name." "I've heard it," Jack said. "How much have you heard?" Jack looked at Megan, then directly at her the way he sometimes looked at her when he wanted information he sensed she had, which was a look she'd learned to read correctly over 9 years. He didn't ask with words. He just looked. Megan set the coffee pot down on the nearest table. She thought about the 7 months she'd been watching Victor Moreno's people come through the diner. The black SUV that parked in the same spot. The men who ordered coffee and didn't drink it and left envelopes on the table that she pretended not to see. She thought about the notebook she'd been keeping in her locker. Dates, license plates, faces, amounts she'd overheard. She told herself she was keeping it because she didn't know what else to do with what she knew, and throwing it away felt wrong. She thought about all of that. She said, "I might have something you need to see." Jack didn't look surprised. He looked, if anything, like a man confirming a calculation he had already made. "Okay," he said. Tyler Brooks was still standing at the door. His gun was at his side. He hadn't moved in 6 minutes. He looked exhausted in the particular way of someone who has been terrified for a long time without any relief. One of the bikers near the window, an older man heavy-set with a white beard and a calm face that had probably been in more rooms like this than most people see in a lifetime, looked at Tyler and said without getting up, without any edge in his voice at all, "Son, why don't you come sit down? You look like you haven't slept in 3 days." Tyler looked at him. He looked around the room. He looked at Ethan, who gave him a small nod. Tyler Brooks put his gun in his waistband. He walked to the nearest empty stool at the counter. He sat down. Brianna behind the counter poured him a cup of coffee. He wrapped his hands around it and didn't say anything, and for a moment in the yellow light of the Coyote Ridge Diner, he was just a 20-year-old kid who was very tired and very scared and who had run completely out of road. Megan looked at him. She looked at Ethan. She looked at Jack Morrison in the corner, already in a low conversation with Danny and Tom, the kind of conversation that was already becoming a plan. She thought 12 miles outside of Flagstaff on a Thursday night in October, these two boys walked through the wrong door. She picked up her coffee pot. She thought, or maybe the right one. She went back to work. Megan went to her locker at 9:58. She didn't announce it. She didn't ask permission. She just told Brianna to keep the coffee going, walked through the kitchen past Darlene, who was standing against the prep counter with her arms crossed and her face arranged into the specific expression she wore when she had decided not to panic and was working very hard at it, and she went to the back hallway where the staff lockers were bolted to the wall. Her locker was the second from the left. The combination was her mother's birthday. She opened it, moved her spare apron to one side, and pulled out the notebook. It was a standard composition notebook, the kind with the black and white marbled cover that you find in the school supply aisle for 99 cents. She'd started keeping it in March, 7 months ago. She told herself she was doing it because it helped her think that writing things down was just a habit, just a way of processing the strange and unsettling parade of faces that had been coming through the diner on Victor Moreno's business for the better part of a year. She'd told herself a lot of things. She carried the notebook back out to the floor. Jack Morrison looked at it when she set it on his table. He didn't touch it yet. He looked at her face first. "How long?" he said. 7 months. "You've been keeping this the whole time?" "Yes." He picked it up. He opened it to the first page. His eyes moved across her handwriting, careful, neat, the kind of handwriting that slows down when it knows the information matters. And the expression on his face didn't change exactly, but something behind his eyes shifted and settled into a harder register. Danny Reeves leaned in from the side. He read 3 lines and sat back. "She's got plates," Danny said. "I can see that." "Jack, she's got dates going back to off on." "I can read, Danny." Danny went quiet. Jack turned to the second page, then the third. He read without speaking for 2 full minutes, which in the current atmosphere of the Coyote Ridge Diner felt like a geological age. Around them, the diner had reorganized itself without anyone issuing instructions, the way a body responds to a cut, automatically each part knowing its function. Men who had been sitting in booths had shifted positions so that the angles of the room were covered. Nobody was blocking the exits. Nobody was doing anything that looked like preparation. But the preparation was there, quiet and complete, in the arrangement of 40 men who understood space and contingency in the way that comes from long experience. Ethan Parker was watching Jack read. His coffee cup was empty. He hadn't asked for more. His hands were flat on the table, and he was very still, in the way of someone who has finally stopped running and doesn't know what happens next. "How do you know Moreno?" Jack said without looking up from the notebook. Megan pulled a chair from the nearest empty table and sat down at the edge of his booth. She'd never sat at a customer's table in 11 years of working the Coyote Ridge. It felt strange and completely necessary. "I don't know him personally," she said. "He's never come in himself. He sends people." "What kind of people?" "3 of them usually. They rotate. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes all 3. They come in, they order coffee, they don't drink it. They sit for about 40 minutes. Whoever they're meeting comes in separately, sits at the counter, leaves something, an envelope, a phone. Once it was a folded piece of paper. I don't know what was in it. Then everyone leaves. They tip exactly 10%, which tells you everything you need to know about them. The corner of Jack's mouth moved. I wrote down every time they came, Megan continued. The dates, the times, which vehicles were in the lot. The booth they sat in, anything I heard. I don't have audio. I'm not law enforcement. I kept thinking somebody should know. I kept thinking somebody was going to come in here one day who needed to know and it would be useful. She paused. I didn't think it would be tonight. Jack closed the notebook. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite categorize, not quite respect, not quite gratitude, something more specific than either of those things. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who sees a person doing the right thing in the quiet, private way that nobody applauds. Do you know what he does? Jack said. Moreno. I know what I've seen come through this diner. I know the men he sends don't look like businessmen, and I know the people they meet look scared. I know that in 7 months, I've watched at least 4 different people sit at my counter with the specific face of someone who has run out of options. She glanced at Ethan without meaning to. I know that face well by now. Ethan met her eyes for a second and then looked back at the table. Victor Moreno runs a collection operation, Jack said. He said it the way people state facts they find neither surprising nor interesting, flatly accurately. He finds people in financial trouble, lends them money at terms that are designed to be impossible, and when they can't pay, he converts the debt. He takes labor, he takes property, he takes other things. The word landed without decoration. He's been operating in the corridor between Flagstaff and Williams for about 3 years. The people he targets are the ones who can't go to the police, immigrants, people with records, people who owe back taxes, people with family members who are vulnerable. His eyes went briefly to Tyler at the counter, people who have a 17-year-old sister. The diner was silent enough that you could hear the highway outside. Tyler's head came up from his coffee cup. His face had gone a specific shade of white. You knew about him already, Tyler said, before tonight. I knew the name, I knew the approximate shape of the operation. Jack looked at him directly. I didn't know the specifics. I didn't have what she's been putting in this notebook for 7 months. Then why hasn't anyone stopped him? It was a genuine question. The raw, bewildered question of someone young enough to still be surprised that bad things are allowed to continue when people know about them. Jack didn't treat it like a naive question. He answered it straight. Because knowing something and proving it are different problems, he said. And because the people he targets don't have the resources or the safety to be witnesses. He's built the operation around that. The vulnerability of his victims is the protection for his business. He set the notebook on the table in front of him and put his hand flat on top of it. This changes the math. Tom Garrett, who had been listening from the booth behind without speaking, said, How much does he have on you? He was asking Ethan and Tyler both, and they understood that. 11,800, and Tyler said. That's what started as 4,000 6 months ago. Tom made a sound that wasn't quite a word. The interest rate is, Tyler started. I know what the interest rate is, Tom said. Not unkindly, just with the weight of a man who has seen this specific arithmetic before and finds it exactly as ugly each time. Phil Ochoa, sitting at the end of Jack's booth, had pulled out his phone and was typing something. He didn't look up. I'm running the plates from the notebook, he said to nobody in particular. Already, Megan said. I've got resources, Phil said simply. Megan looked at the notebook in Jack's hands, then at Phil's phone, then at Danny Reeves, who was writing something on a paper napkin, a list organized with dates and dollar amounts that he was reconstructing from memory of what he'd read. She thought these men walked in here tonight for coffee and pie, and they have in the space of about 25 minutes converted this situation into something that looks considerably more like an operation than a robbery response. She wasn't sure how she felt about that. She wasn't sure it mattered how she felt about that. She thought about Cassie Brooks, 17 years old, being followed to her school or her job or her friend's house by men who work for Victor Moreno, and she decided how she felt about it. The men he sent to see Tyler, Jack said. The ones who told you about Cassie. How many were there? Ethan answered. 2, same ones every time. One of them is big, maybe 6'3", shaved head tattoo on the left side of his neck, Looks like a tribal pattern. The other one is shorter, older gray in his hair, always wears a blue jacket. Megan went still, not externally. She didn't move. But something inside her went completely quiet in the way it goes quiet when something you suspected privately just got confirmed publicly. Blue jacket, she said. Ethan looked at her. Yeah, why? She looked at Jack. Jack was already looking at her. The blue jacket has been here 6 times in 7 months, she said. He's in the notebook. 3rd page, I think. Every time he came in, he sat in booth 4. He always met the same person, a man in his 40s, salt and pepper hair, who drove a dark blue sedan with a Coconino County sticker on the rear bumper. The booth went quiet. Danny Reeves looked up from his napkin. Coconino County sticker. Yes. That's a county vehicle registration sticker, Danny said. I know. Another silence. Longer this time. Jack opened the notebook back to page 3. He found the entry. He read it. He looked at Megan. You wrote down a partial plate. I wrote down everything I could see from the window without being obvious about it. FWX something, he read. The last 2 characters were blocked by a truck, but the first 3 are right. Phil had looked up from his phone. He'd stopped typing. I need that partial. Megan said it again. Phil typed it in. He waited. The wait was maybe 90 seconds, which felt considerably longer. Phil's expression didn't change when he looked at his phone, but his jaw tightened in a specific way. Phil, Jack said. Give me 1 second. Phil put the phone face down on the table. He looked at Jack. You need to hear this somewhere else. We're fine right here. Jack, Phil's voice was very even. You need to hear this somewhere else, Waze. A shift happened in the booth. Something in the way the 4 men oriented toward each other that changed the pressure in the conversation without anyone moving more than an inch. Megan understood she was being excluded from the next 30 seconds, and she didn't argue with it. She stood up. She picked up Ethan's empty coffee cup. She went and got the pot. She refilled Ethan's cup. She checked on Brianna. She checked on Tyler at the counter, who was sitting with his elbows on the formica and his face in his hands, not crying, just carrying the full weight of what 6 months of running from Victor Moreno's arithmetic had done to him. Hey, Megan said. Tyler looked up. We're going to figure this out, she said. He looked at her the way people look at words they want to believe and aren't sure they're allowed to. You don't know that. I've been watching Jack Morrison operate in this diner for 9 years, she said. I know that. Tyler looked over at the corner booth where Jack and his men were having the quiet, compressed conversation that Phil had wanted. Then he looked back at Megan. He does this, Tyler said, like this is a thing he actually does. He does a lot of things, Megan said. Tonight, this is the thing. She moved back down the counter. She refilled cups. The diner had settled into a strange, suspended atmosphere, the kind of stillness that isn't emptiness, but compression, the way weather feels before the barometric pressure finally breaks one direction. Men were talking in low voices, eating food that had gone a little cold, checking phones. The normal behavior of people who were choosing not to escalate and were managing themselves accordingly. Sadie, the new girl, appeared at Megan's elbow. What do I do? She whispered. Keep filling coffee, Megan said. Don't ask questions you don't need answered. If anyone asks for pie, tell them the apple's gone. It went at 8, but we've got peach and we've got cherry. That's it? That's it. Sadie nodded, squared her shoulders, and went back to work. Megan watched her for a second with something close to affection. 12 weeks on the bus, and the girl had the right instincts. You couldn't teach that. It was Phil who spoke first when Jack's conversation ended. Not to the room, just to the corner booth, but the diner had gotten quiet enough that his voice carried whether he intended it to or not. The plate partial matches a vehicle registered to the Coconino County Public Works Department, Phil said. Issued to a department employee. We're cross-referencing the description of the driver, 40-something salt and pepper hair, against a list of employees with vehicle access. Ethan Parker had heard that. He was looking at the corner booth. Someone who works for the county, he said slowly. That's who Moreno was meeting here. We don't know that yet, Jack said. But it could be. A lot of things could be. If Moreno has someone inside county government. Ethan stopped himself. He understood the implication without finishing it. A connection to county employment meant a connection to databases, to court records, to information about who was filing complaints, who was behind on taxes, who was facing foreclosure. It meant a pipeline of exactly the kind of people Victor Moreno needed for his operation. It meant the vulnerability wasn't accidental, it was curated. That's how he finds them. Ethan said very quietly. That's how he knew about Tyler's family. Nobody confirmed it, nobody denied it. But the silence in the booth had the particular quality of a silence that is doing the work of confirmation. Danny Reeves set down his pen. He looked at the napkin he'd been writing on dates amounts, a rough timeline of Victor Moreno's activity through the Coyote Ridge Diner, as Megan's notebook had recorded it. He folded the napkin twice and put it in his jacket pocket with the careful, specific motion of a man archiving something that matters. We need to call Raymond, Danny said. Jack nodded once. Who's Raymond? Ethan asked. Federal case agent, Jack said. Raymond Hollis. He runs a financial crimes and extortion task force out of Phoenix. Ethan stared at him. You have a federal case agent that you can just call? I have a lot of people I can call, Jack said. It wasn't a boast. It was just a statement of accumulated relationships, the kind you build over 30 years of existing in a world where institutions fail people and informal networks pick up what falls through. Would he, Ethan started. He stopped. He reorganized the question. Would Moreno know if you called someone? Would Moreno find out? Jack looked at him steadily. That depends on who Moreno has in his corner, which is exactly what we're trying to determine before we make any calls. The weight of that landed on the table between them. If Victor Moreno had a county employee feeding him information, it wasn't impossible that he had other connections, complicit connections, the kind that made reporting the wrong thing to the wrong person more dangerous than not reporting at all. Ethan Parker, who had walked into the Coyote Ridge Diner 40 minutes ago with a gun and a failing plan, understood this with the particular clarity of someone who had spent 6 months being shown exactly how the systems that were supposed to protect people could be turned against them. Tyler's sister, Ethan said. Cassie, the 72-hour clock is real. That's not a negotiating tactic. That's a deadline. I understand that, Jack said. So whatever you're doing, whatever this is, it needs to move. It is moving, Jack said. His voice was patient, but there was iron underneath it, the kind of patience that is not passive, but is instead a very controlled form of speed. The mistake you make in situations like this is you confuse motion with progress. I am not moving fast. I am moving correctly. There's a difference, and the difference matters. Ethan held his gaze for a long moment. Then he sat back. From the door, and this was the moment the room noticed it before anyone said a word out loud, because 43 people had been managing their awareness of the parking lot in the way that people do when they know the situation has an exterior component from the door, Sadie said, in a voice she kept very carefully neutral. There's a black SUV that just turned into the lot. Every man in the diner registered it, not visibly, not with movement, but with the subtle biological shift of people whose alertness has just stepped up one level uniformly. Megan didn't go to the window. She watched Jack's face instead. Jack was already looking at Phil. Phil was looking at the notebook. They do drive-bys, Jack asked Megan without inflection. Once, she said, in June, an SUV came through the lot, slow didn't stop left. I wrote it down. Page 9. Phil opened the notebook to page 9. Tyler Brooks had turned on his stool. He was facing the door now, and his right hand had moved toward his waistband, and Megan saw it, and so did the biker with the white beard sitting 2 stools down, whose hand came down gently on Tyler's forearm without drama or announcement. Easy, the man said. Tyler looked at him. Whatever's in that lot, the man said, has no idea what's in this room. That's an advantage. Don't give it up. Tyler's hard hand moved away from his waistband. He turned back to the counter. He picked up his coffee. His hand was shaking slightly, but he picked it up. Outside, the SUV sat in the lot. Nobody inside the diner moved. 30 seconds passed. It felt like a month. Then Sadie said still in that carefully neutral voice, it's pulling back out. It's leaving. The pressure in the room dropped about 10 degrees in the other direction, not down to danger, but back to the controlled tension of people managing a complex situation with professionalism. Ethan let out a breath that he'd been holding so long, his chest ached. They're checking, he said. Yes, Jack said. They think something went wrong. They gave us a window and amount of time to be in here, and we ran over it. Probably. So they know something's off. They just don't know what. Jack looked at him with genuine, measured attention. You think fast. I've had 6 months of practice, Ethan said. And there was nothing wry about it. Just fact. Which means we have a shorter timeline than I'd like, Jack said. He looked at Danny. Danny was already on his phone. He looked at Phil. Phil had the notebook open and was photographing pages with his phone, systematic and fast. He looked at Tom Garrett, who had moved at some point in the last 5 minutes to a position near the door that was not coincidental. Tom gave him a small nod. Jack Morrison looked at Ethan Parker across the table and said, I want you to tell me everything you know about Victor Moreno's schedule, where he operates, who else you've seen, anything Tyler's told you, anything you've seen yourself, everything. Ethan nodded. Start from the beginning, Jack said. Ethan started from the beginning. And Megan, standing at the edge of the room with her coffee pot and her notebook now in other hands, doing necessary work, listened to a 22-year-old kid dismantle 6 months of fear, one sentence at a time. And she thought about Cassie Brooks, 17 years old, and being watched by men who thought they had all the leverage in the world. She thought about what it meant that those men had just driven through this parking lot and left. They'd left because nothing looked wrong from the outside, because the diner looked exactly the way a diner looks at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night. Because from a parking lot through windows, 40 men drinking coffee and eating pie looks indistinguishable from 40 men doing anything else. That was the thing about the Coyote Ridge. You didn't know what was inside it until you were already in it. Victor Moreno's people had just made the mistake of assuming they did. Ethan talked for 18 minutes straight. He talked the way people talk when they've been holding something alone for too long, and the weight of it has been doing damage, not dramatic, not performed, just steady and relentless. One fact after another, the kind of accounting that only happens when someone has finally found a room where the information is safe to release. He told Jack everything. The first contact with the Moreno's people, the terms of the loan, the way the interest recalculated every 2 weeks at a rate that made the original sum irrelevant within 60 days. The escalation. The first time they came to Tyler's house. The second time when they made the comment about Cassie that changed the entire nature of what was happening. The third visit when they stopped, being subtle entirely, and told Tyler in plain language what would happen to his sister if the money didn't materialize inside 72 hours. Jack listened without interrupting. He didn't take notes. Danny was doing that still on a second napkin, now the handwriting getting smaller and more compressed as the information density increased. Jack just watched Ethan's face and listened the way a man listens when he is building something in Vermont and from the materials being provided, fitting pieces together, checking angles, testing the structure. When Ethan stopped talking, the diner was quiet for 5 full seconds. Then Jack said, "The man who came the third time, the one who made the explicit threat about Cassie, was that the man in the blue jacket or the tall one with the neck tattoo?" Ethan thought about it. Blue jacket. Jack nodded once slowly like a single period at the end of a long sentence. "He's the one who matters," Jack said. Not to Ethan particularly, to the table, to the information that now lived on Danny's napkin and in Phil's phone, and in the specific architecture of understanding that had been building in the corner booth of the Coyote Ridge Diner for the last 40 minutes. Phil looked up from his phone. "I've got a name on the county vehicle." The booth went still. The partial plate cross-referenced with vehicle type and department. There's only one employee in Coconino County Public Works who matches the physical description Megan gave. Male, mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, assigned a county sedan. Phil paused for exactly the length of time it takes a person to decide whether to say the next thing out loud. "His name is Gerald Fitch. He's been with the county for 11 years. He processes financial hardship applications for the county assistance office." Megan had come close enough to hear it. She stood at the edge of the nearest table and didn't say anything, and felt something cold move through her chest. Financial hardship applications. People who were behind on property taxes. People applying for emergency assistance. People who were, by definition, in exactly the kind of trouble that made them visible to someone like Victor Moreno. "He's a spotter," Megan said. Everybody looked at her. "That's what he does," she said. "He sits in that county office and he reads applications all day, and he identifies the people who are desperate enough and isolated enough that they'll take money from anyone who offers it, and then he passes that information to Moreno." She could hear the flatness in her own voice, and she didn't try to change it because what she was describing was flat, It was the particular flatness of a betrayal that has been dressed up in bureaucratic procedure for so long, it had started to look like furniture. That's how Moreno knew about Tyler's father's medical bills. That's how he knew the family had no other options. Someone in a government office read their application and sold that information to a predator. The word landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Tyler Brooks at the counter had turned around again. He wasn't reaching for his waistband this time. He was just sitting there with his hands flat on the counter and his face doing the particular terrible thing that faces do when a person realizes the betrayal was more complete than they had understood. The system that was supposed to help his family had been the instrument of their targeting. "Tyler," Jack said, steady, grounding. "Stay with me." Tyler looked at him. His jaw was working, but no sound was coming out. "I know," Jack said. "I know what that is. You can be angry about it later, and I promise you that is a completely appropriate response. Right now, I need you focused." Tyler pressed his lips together. He nodded. One small, rigid nod. "Gerald Fitch," Danny said, looking at his napkin. "How solid is this?" "Solid enough to move on," Phil said. "Not solid enough for a courtroom yet. But with what's in that notebook," he glanced at Megan, "and what Ethan just gave us, we can build it." "Raymond needs to hear all of it tonight," Jack said. "Agreed." "But we have a problem," Tom Garrett said from near the door. He hadn't moved from his position there, and his voice had the particular texture it gets when a man is reporting an observation rather than raising an objection. "That SUV came through once. It's going to come through again. Moreno's people know the boys are overdue. When it comes through the second time and still sees nothing wrong, they might move. Not on the diner, on the sister." The word sister hit Tyler like a physical thing. He gripped the counter edge. Ethan's hand went flat on his table. "Then we need to move faster." "We're moving as fast as the situation allows," Jack said. "Faster than that, and we make mistakes. Mistakes tonight cost us the case and cost Cassie her safety." He looked at Tom. "How long do you think we have?" "If they drove away at 10:15, Tom said, "and they're doing a circuit checking other locations, maybe checking the boys' residences, I'd give it 45 minutes before they come back. Maybe an hour." Jack checked his watch. "Then we have 40 minutes. Let's use them." What happened in the next 40 minutes was not chaos. That was the thing Megan kept coming back to later when she tried to describe it to people who hadn't been there. It was the opposite of chaos. It was the most organized 40 minutes she had ever witnessed, executed by men who moved and spoke and coordinated with the economy of people who had done difficult things in difficult circumstances long enough that the difficulty had become simply the baseline condition of working. Danny got Raymond Hollis on the phone at 10:22. Raymond Hollis was apparently not a man who minded being called after 10 on a Thursday, or if he minded, he had learned to set that preference aside because Danny talked for 4 minutes straight, and Raymond didn't interrupt once. And when Danny finished, Raymond said 3 words: "Send me everything." Danny said, "Give us 20 minutes. Raymond said, "You've got 15. Phil was already compiling. He'd photographed every page of Megan's notebook. He'd transcribed Danny's napkin notes into a coherent timeline on his phone. He'd assembled the partial plate information, Gerald Fitch's name and position, and the list that Ethan had just provided locations. Moreno's people had referenced a storage facility off Route 89 that Ethan had been told to bring the money to the physical descriptions of the men who'd made the threats. "The storage facility," Jack said. "Did they give you a unit number?" Ethan shook his head. "Just the address. They said someone would meet us there." "Which means Moreno or someone close to him would have been present for a $12,000 collection," Phil said. "That's not delegated, that's personal." "Which means we'd have placed him at the scene of his own extortion," Danny said. "If we'd had someone there to document it," Phil said. He looked at Jack. Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Let Raymond decide how to use that." Megan had been listening to all of it while she worked, filling coffee, checking on Brianna and Sadie, moving through the diner in the automatic way of someone whose body knows the job well enough to do it without supervision, while the mind operates somewhere else entirely. She paused at the counter near Tyler. He was staring at his phone. His thumb wasn't moving. He was just staring at it. "You're thinking about calling her," Megan said. "I need to know she's okay. If you call her and Moreno's people are watching her, they'll know you're not where you're supposed to be." "I know that." His voice cracked on the second word, and he controlled it immediately the way young men do when they've decided that breaking down is not something they have permission for. I know that. I just, she's my sister. She's 17. She doesn't know any of this is happening tonight, and she's sitting wherever she is, and she doesn't know that people who want to hurt her are in the same city. He stopped. He put his phone face down. I hate that she doesn't know. She's safer not knowing, Megan said. Tonight, the most dangerous thing for her is panic. Yours or hers. Tyler looked at her. He looked younger every time she looked at him. Or maybe she was just seeing him more clearly each time. Are you scared? He asked her. She thought about it honestly. Yes, she said, but scared is just information. It's telling you something matters. It doesn't have to tell you what to do. He sat with him for a moment. Then he nodded slowly, like a person accepting something they don't entirely understand, but can feel the truth of anyway. Jack's voice cut across the room. Not loud. It never needed to be loud. Megan, she went to the booth. I need to ask you something, and I need a straight answer, Jack said. Okay. In 7 months of watching these men come through here, the blue jacket, the tall one, the others did, any of them ever pay attention to you specifically? Any indication they noticed you noticing them? Megan thought about it. She went through the 7 months the way she'd trained herself to go through her memories sequentially, the way the notebook was organized date by date. She was looking for a specific thing. A look held too long. A question asked that didn't need to be asked. A moment when the script of the coffee and envelope routine deviated in a way that suggested awareness of observation. Once, she said, Jack waited. April, the tall one-neck tattoo, he was leaving after a meeting. He got to the door and he turned around. He looked directly at me. I was behind the counter. I had a coffee pot in my hand. I was doing what I always do. He looked at me for maybe 3 seconds. She paused. Then he left. Did he come back after that? 4 times. Same behavior as done, exactly the same. Coffee meeting envelope, 10% tip. Jack looked at Danny. Danny made a face that communicated something between relief and calculation. He decided you were furniture, Danny said. He processed, he decided you were part of the room. That's what I thought, Megan said. That's what saved the notebook, Jack said. She hadn't thought of it that way. She stood there for a second and let the truth of it arrange itself. 7 months of careful, quiet observation preserved because a man had looked at her and dismissed her as scenery. She wasn't sure whether to feel insulted or grateful. She decided grateful was more useful. Phil's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His expression shifted in a way that was controlled but not completely controllable. Phil, Jack said. Raymond ran Gerald Fitch. Phil set the phone on the table so Jack could read the screen. He's not just a spotter. He's been on Raymond's peripheral radar for 8 months. There's a pattern of financial information leaks from the county assistance office that Raymond's task force has been trying to source. They knew there was someone inside. They didn't have a name. The booth absorbed that. Jack looked at the phone for a long moment. Then he looked up at Megan. Your notebook, he said, just gave a federal task force the missing piece of an 8-month investigation. Megan sat down, not because she chose to. Her knees made the decision independently, and she respected it. Ethan Parker was watching from his booth. He'd heard it. His face was doing something complicated, not triumph, not relief, something more mixed than either of those, the expression of someone who has just learned that the catastrophic mistake they made led somewhere completely unexpected, and the reckoning of that hasn't finished processing yet. We walked into a room full of hell's angels, Ethan said mostly to himself. We walked in here to rob a diner, and he stopped. He shook his head. We handed them the case. You didn't hand us anything, Jack said. Megan handed us the case. You provided the confirmation that made it actionable tonight instead of 8 months from now. He looked at Ethan directly. There's a difference, but yes, something that started completely wrong is heading somewhere considerably better. Ethan put his elbows on the table and pressed both hands over his face. He stayed like that for a moment. When he took his hands down, he looked exhausted and 20 years older and about 5 pounds lighter, the specific appearance of someone who has set down something they've been carrying for a very long time. What happens to us, he said. Me and Tyler, we came in here with guns. We attempted, he paused on the word, we attempted a robbery. Jack looked at him for a long moment. What happened in this diner tonight, Jack said carefully, is that two young men made a very poor decision and then made a series of considerably better ones. No money was taken, no one was hurt, information was provided voluntarily that will help remove a predator from this community. He laced his fingers on the table. Raymond is going to want to talk to you. Both of you. What you tell him and how you tell it is going to matter more than what you did when you walked through that door. We'd be witnesses, Ethan said. Yes. Against Moreno. Yes. And Cassie, is the reason we're making this call tonight instead of waiting for a cleaner situation, Jack said. Her protection is part of what Raymond is going to guarantee, or he doesn't get the notebook. He doesn't get the name, he doesn't get the storage facility address, and he doesn't get the confirmation on Gerald Fitch. He said it without drama. It was simply the structure of the negotiation stated plainly. I've been doing this long enough to know what leverage is and how to use it. You are not walking into Raymond Hollis empty-handed. You're walking in with the case he's been trying to build for 8 months. That changes your position considerably. Tyler had left his stool. He was standing closer now at the edge of the booth, having moved without announcing it. He was looking at Jack with an expression that was trying very hard not to be hope, and was failing. You'd do that, Tyler said. You'd negotiate for us. You don't know us. We came in here with guns. Jack looked at him steadily. You came in here desperate, which is a different thing. And you've got a 17-year-old sister whose safety is not negotiable. Those two facts are sufficient. Tyler opened his mouth, closed it. Thank you, he said. Just that. It came out rough, the words scraped clean of everything decorative, just the core of it. Jack nodded once and looked back at his phone. It was Tom Garrett who saw it first. He was still near the door. He hadn't left that position in 40 minutes, and he said in a voice that was completely level and completely serious. Second pass. The room registered it instantly. The same collective shift as before, but faster this time. The response of people who had already processed this once and didn't need the cycle to run again from the beginning. The SUV was back. This time it stopped. Not in the lot. On the highway's shoulder, maybe 80 feet from the diner entrance. Just stopped. Engine running, you could see the exhaust in the cold October air through the window. Sitting there. They're counting bikes, Phil said quietly. They're doing math, Jack said. The math was this 41 motorcycles in the parking lot and two young men who were supposed to be inside committing a robbery and have been in there for going on an hour. The math produced a question that had no good answer for Moreno's people, which meant it was about to produce a decision. They're going to call someone, Danny said. They're going to call Moreno directly, Jack said, which means Moreno is going to make a call about Cassie. The word hit Tyler like a switch being thrown. Every muscle in his body changed state at once. We have to stay exactly where you are, Jack said. Not harsh, absolute. Tell her, look at me, stay exactly where you are. Tyler looked at him. If those men outside see any change in this diner, anyone moving toward the door, any disruption of how this room looks from the outside, they don't wait for a call. They act immediately. Jack held Tyler's gaze with the specific, steady force of a man who has talked people back from edges before and knows exactly how to do it. Your sister is safest if nothing changes in the next 3 minutes. Can you give me 3 minutes? Tyler's fists were clenched at his sides. His whole body was one long argument against staying still, but he held Jack's eyes, and he stayed. 3 minutes, he said. Jack looked at Danny. Raymond, Danny already had the phone to his ear. He spoke for 30 seconds. He listened. He said, how fast? He listened again. He lowered the phone. He's got a field team 22 minutes out, Danny said. He can have someone at the Brooks family address in, he checked back with the phone, 18 minutes. Cassie's home tonight, Jack asked Tyler. She should be. She works Tuesdays and Saturdays. She's home Thursday nights. Jack looked at Megan. She didn't know why he looked at her in that moment, but he did, and she met it, and something in the look said, this is the part where it either holds or it doesn't, and we've done everything we can do, and now we find out. Outside, the SUV hadn't moved. 18 minutes felt like a country. The diner held its breath, and Jack Morrison drank the last of his coffee, and Danny kept Raymond Hollis on the line, and Megan stood in the middle of the room she'd worked in for 11 years and felt every second of the next 18 minutes as a distinct, separate, physical thing. And Tyler Brooks stood at the edge of the booth with his fists at his sides, and his eyes on Jack, and gave him every single one of those 3 minutes, and then the next three after that, and then the next. Because sometimes the only thing you can do for the person you love is trust the room you're standing in. And trust in the Coyote Ridge Diner on a Thursday night in October was the only currency that had ever actually been worth anything. Danny's phone was still connected to Raymond Hollis when the SUV outside made its decision. It didn't pull into the lot. It pulled back onto the highway and accelerated south back toward Flagstaff. And the sound of it faded into the kind of silence that doesn't feel like relief because everyone in the room understood what it meant. They weren't leaving because the situation had resolved. They were leaving because they decided to stop waiting and start acting, and the action they were going to take wasn't here. Tom Garrett said it before anyone else could. They're going to Cassie. Tyler moved before the sentence finished, and Jack was already out of the booth, already in front of him. Not grabbing him, not restraining him, just placing himself in Tyler's path with the specific physical authority of a man who has stopped people from making fatal mistakes before and knows exactly how much force the moment requires. Danny, Jack said without taking his eyes off Tyler. Raymond, Danny was already talking. We need that address covered right now. Not 18 minutes. Right now. A pause. He listened, his jaw tightened. How many minutes? Another pause. Do it. Tyler was breathing in short, fast pulls. His eyes were on Jack, and they were asking a question that didn't have words yet. Raymond is redirecting, Danny said. He had a unit doing a traffic stop on 40. They were breaking off. ETA to the Brooks address is now 11 minutes. 11 minutes, Tyler said. The words came out hollow. Cassie doesn't know anything is wrong, Megan said. She'd moved without planning to, and she was standing close to Tyler now, close enough that her voice didn't need to carry. She's home. She's doing whatever she does on Thursday nights. They don't have a reason to go to her yet. They went to check on you first. That bought time. How much time? Enough, Jack said. If Raymond's unit gets there in 11 minutes, it's enough. Tyler looked at him. The question in his eyes was still there, and now it had a shape. How do you know? How can you possibly know? You can't promise me this. And Jack didn't promise it. He didn't say a word. He just held Tyler's gaze with everything he had, 30 years of knowing what it costs to hold steady when the thing you love most is in the wrong direction and the only correct decision is to stay exactly where you are. Tyler stopped moving forward. He didn't step back. He just stopped. 8 seconds of complete stillness. The whole diner in those 8 seconds was one held breath. Then Tyler turned and walked back to the counter and sat down and put his phone on the formica in front of him, face up, and stared at it like he could will it to ring with the right news. The biker with the white beard. Megan had learned his name was Carl Briggs, 26 years, with the chapter, slid off his stool and sat down 2 seats away from Tyler without being asked and without saying anything. Just placed himself there. Proximity without pressure. The specific comfort of someone who understands that what a person needs in that moment is not words. Megan went back to work. She didn't know what else to do, and she knew that doing something useful was better than standing in the middle of the floor waiting. She checked on Brianna, who had been quietly remarkable all night, keeping tables supplied, keeping her face arranged, in the careful neutral of someone who was doing their job in an abnormal situation without drawing attention to the abnormality. Sadie had found her rhythm too. The diner was running the way a diner runs. Coffee was hot, plates were cleared. The ordinary machinery of the place was doing its ordinary work in the middle of something entirely extraordinary. And there was something about that, the persistence of the ordinary, that Megan found more steadying than anything else. Jack and Danny and Phil were back in the corner booth. The conversation there had shifted register, less reactive, more architectural. Megan caught fragments as she moved. Phil, Raymond's going to want both of them in Phoenix. Danny, not tonight. Phil, he knows that. He means within 48 hours. Jack, what's his read on the Fitch angle? Phil, he says if the notebook puts Fitch at the diner on the dates the county records show hardship applications being accessed after hours, he can get a warrant by morning. Jack, can he, Phil? He said by morning. I believe him. Raymond doesn't estimate, he calculates. A pause. The sound of coffee being set down. Danny, the storage facility is the key. If Moreno shows up there expecting a $12,000 collection and finds something else, Jack, that's Raymond's call, not ours. Danny, I know, I'm just saying it's the cleanest path to putting Moreno himself in a room. Jack, I know what you're saying. Let Raymond build the room. That's his job. Megan set a fresh pot on the burner and let the conversation continue without her. She had her own thinking to do. She was thinking about the notebook, about 7 months of writing things down in a composition notebook that cost 99 cents in the back hallway of a diner 12 miles outside of Flagstaff, because something in her had refused to look away from what was happening at Booth 4. She'd never thought of herself as someone who did things like that. She thought of herself as a waitress, a good one, the kind who remembered your order and noticed when you were having a bad day and made sure your coffee was hot when you needed it. She'd never thought of herself as someone who kept records of criminal activity or sat at the table of a Hells Angels chapter president in the middle of an active extortion situation and contributed material information to a federal investigation. She didn't know what to call what she was now. She decided it didn't need a name. Ethan Parker had left his booth. He was standing near the kitchen door, leaning against the wall, not quite in the room and not quite out of it. He had his arms crossed over his chest, and his eyes were on Tyler at the counter, and his expression was the expression of someone who has been responsible for another person for a long time and has been failing at that responsibility and knows it and is in the process of deciding what to do with that knowledge going forward. Megan came to stand near him. "You grew up together," she said. Not a question. "Since we were 8, Ethan said. "Our mothers worked at the same place. We rode the same bus." He kept his eyes on Tyler. Tyler's not built for this kind of thing. He's not soft. I don't mean that. He works hard. He's good at what he does. He's just some people know how to survive, getting ground down, and some people weren't built for it. Tyler's the second kind. The grinding was going to break him. So you tried to fix it. I tried to do something, turned out to be the wrong something. It's turning into the right something, Megan said. Ethan made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Jack said the same thing, more or less. Jack's usually right about those kinds of assessments. Ethan looked at her sideways. You trust him. I've watched him operate for 9 years, she said. I've watched him walk through that door with different problems on different nights and handle every one of them with more patience than most people have for situations that are comfortable and simple. Yes, I trust him. He's a Hell's Angel. Yes. You know what that means. What that's historically. I know the history, Megan said. I also know the man. Both things are true and they don't cancel each other out. The world is complicated. Jack Morrison is complicated. What he's doing tonight is not. Ethan went quiet for a moment. Then, what is he getting out of this? Really, no angle. Megan thought about it honestly. I think he walked into a situation where a 17-year-old girl was being threatened by a predator and everything else became secondary. She said, I think men like Jack have a particular response to that specific situation. I've seen it before, smaller scale. Something simplifies for them. They stop calculating and they just move. Ethan absorbed that. He looked back at Tyler. Cassie's going to be okay, he said. And it wasn't entirely a question, but it wasn't entirely a statement either. Yes, Megan said, and she meant it. Danny Reeves raised his voice enough to carry across the diner. Not much, just enough. Raymond's unit is on the Brook Street. Tyler's head came up from his phone. They're doing a drive-by first. Danny continued relaying what he was hearing in real time. Looking for the SUV, looking for any. He paused, listening. Street is clear. No unfamiliar vehicles. They're going to the door. The diner was absolutely silent. Tyler was standing now without knowing when he'd stood up. Carl Briggs was standing beside him. Danny had his eyes closed. He was listening with his whole body. Agent at the door, someone answered. A pause that lasted approximately 1 geological era. Cassie Brooks is home. She's safe. She doesn't appear to have had any contact. Tyler sat back down on the stool, or more accurately, his legs made the decision to sit and his body followed. He put both elbows on the counter and both hands over his face and made a sound that was very quiet and had no word for it in any language, the sound of a person releasing something they'd been holding so tightly it had left marks. Carl put a hand on his shoulder. Left it there. Nobody said anything to Tyler for a full minute. They just let him have it. Megan turned away because he deserved the privacy of that moment and because her own eyes were doing something she preferred to manage out of view. She went to the sink behind the counter and ran cold water on her wrists the way her mother had taught her when she was a girl. When you need to come back to yourself, cold water on the wrists, it works. It's always worked. She came back out. Jack was looking at her from the booth. She nodded. He nodded back. Phil was on a call of his own now. Not Raymond, someone else, voice too low to follow. Tom Garrett had come away from the door and was sitting at the counter 2 stools from Tyler, and he and Carl were having a quiet conversation that Megan couldn't hear and didn't need to. It had the shape of men managing the aftermath of tension, the particular conversational rhythm of people who process difficult things by talking around the edges of them first. Ethan had pushed off the wall. He walked to the counter and sat down next to Tyler. He didn't say anything either. He just sat there. After a minute, Tyler took his hands away from his face. He looked at the phone on the counter. He picked it up. "I want to call her," he said. Danny looked at Jack. Jack looked at Danny. "Raymond has an agent at the house," Danny said. "If Tyler calls and she mentions it, if she goes to the door or does anything that changes the exterior appearance of the house before they've had a chance to assess the full perimeter situation." 10 more minutes, Jack said to Tyler. "Give Raymond 10 more minutes to clear the street. Then you call." Tyler set the phone down. He nodded. The nod was small and tight and cost him something. 10 minutes, he said. It was during those 10 minutes that Phil ended his call and looked at Jack with an expression that had something new in it. Not alarm, not quite, something more precise than that. "I need to tell you something," Phil said. Jack read his face. "Say it." "The name Ethan gave us the storage facility off Route 89. Phil glanced at Ethan briefly, then back to Jack. "Raymond's task force has had a flag on that property for 6 months. It's not just a collection point. They believe it's the primary processing location for Moreno's entire northern Arizona operation. Documents, cash, records, loan agreements, everything that constitutes the physical evidence of the extortion network." He paused. "If Moreno shows up there tomorrow night expecting Ethan and Tyler to deliver $12,000, and Raymond has a team in position, he walks into his own arrest," Jack said, "with his records and his money and his operation all in the same building." The booth was very quiet. Danny said, "Raymond knew about the facility. He didn't have cause to move on it. He didn't have a documented transaction in process," Phil said. "He didn't have a victim who could testify to being directed to that specific location for a specific collection on a specific date." He looked at Ethan. "He does now." Ethan Parker had been listening. He understood what was being said. He understood his role in it, and he sat with that for a moment, the weight of being at 22 years old, the documented victim who makes the case executable. "I'd have to go," Ethan said. "No," Jack said immediately. "If they need someone to show up at the facility..." "No," Jack said again, and the word was a wall. "That is Raymond's operation. Raymond has trained agents. You are not walking into a situation with Victor Moreno's people to serve as bait for a federal arrest. That is not happening. But if they need Ethan..." Jack's voice dropped to the register that ended conversations. "You've done your part. You gave Raymond a documented transaction. He can build from there. You are not going anywhere near that storage facility." Ethan closed his mouth. Tom Garrett said quietly, "The kid's got spine, Jack. The kid's got spine, and I'd like him to continue having it attached to the rest of him," Jack said. The tension broke barely in the way tension sometimes breaks in rooms where people are under real pressure, not into laughter exactly, but into the brief, genuine acknowledgement that the absurdity of what's being said is recognized by everyone present and is funnier than the circumstances technically warrant. Ethan's mouth did something that was almost a smile. Almost. Phil's phone buzzed. He read the screen. "Raymond's confirmed. Field team is being repositioned as of tonight. They'll have the storage facility under surveillance by 0300. He looked up. "He wants the boys in Phoenix within 48 hours. Voluntary witness interviews." He said. Phil paused and his voice shifted slightly the way it shifts when you're reading something important. He said, quote, "Tell Jack I owe him one, and I'd prefer not to elaborate on the details of the accounting." Danny laughed. "A real one. Short, genuine, the laugh of a man who has known someone long enough to find their phrasing funny in a specific way." Jack's expression didn't change, but something in it warmed by about 2 degrees. "Raymond's been trying to close this case for 14 months, Jack said mostly to himself. "Now he can," Danny said. The 10 minutes were up. Tyler picked up his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen. "Go ahead," Jack said. Tyler called Cassie. She picked up on the second ring. The whole diner could hear her voice, not clearly enough to make out words, but clearly enough to hear the texture of it, confused slightly, alarmed at the hour, but present, solid, safe. Tyler said, "Hey, it's me. I needed to hear your voice. I know it's late, I know." A pause. He listened to her. His face did something complicated and private, and nobody in the diner looked directly at him for it. "No, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'll explain tomorrow. I promise." Another pause. "Lock the door. Both locks. Just do that for me." A pause. "Because I asked you to." A pause. "I love you too." He ended the call. He set the phone on the counter. He breathed. Megan picked up the coffee pot. She went down the counter and refilled every cup that needed it. When she got to Tyler, she poured him a fresh cup, even though his was still half full. He didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. She just poured it. That was what you did. You kept pouring. You kept moving. You kept the coffee hot and the room warm, and you did the small, unglamorous, necessary work of holding a place together while the larger, louder things got resolved around it. Darlene appeared from the kitchen. She'd been back there the whole time. Megan had checked on her twice, and both times Darlene had said she was fine, and she was clearly not fine, but she was functional, which for Darlene was the same thing. Now she came out onto the floor with a tray of fresh pie peach and cherry, what she had left, and she started setting pieces in front of people without asking the way Darlene had always operated, the deep conviction that food was a reasonable response to almost any human situation. She set a piece of peach pie in front of Tyler. He looked at it. "Eat it," Darlene said. "You look like you haven't eaten since Tuesday." Tyler picked up the fork. Darlene moved down the counter. She stopped next to Jack's booth. She looked at Jack Morrison with the expression of a woman who has owned a diner for 31 years and has seen the full range of what human beings are capable of and has decided somewhere along the way not to be surprised by any of it. "Your chapter," she said, "every year. 9 years." She paused. "I want you to know I understand what this place is because of nights like this." Jack looked up at her. "I mean it," she said. He nodded. "So do I," he said. Darlene put a piece of apple pie in front of him. The last piece she must have saved it from the back and went back to the kitchen without another word. Jack looked at the pie for a moment. He picked up his fork. Outside, the October highway was empty in both directions. The parking lot held 41 motorcycles in the cold, dark, patient, and still. Inside, the Coyote Ridge Diner held the specific, weighted quiet of people who have been through something together and are now on the other side of the worst of it, finding their way back to themselves one small, ordinary thing at a time. Megan leaned against the counter and looked at the room, at Jack in his booth with his pea, at Tyler eating without tasting, at Ethan staring at the counter with the look of a man doing the long, private accounting of the night, at Brianna refilling the sugar dispensers as if it were any other Thursday, at Carl and Tom talking quietly, at Danny still on the phone with Raymond Hollis, still building the architecture of what came next. She thought about the notebook, about 7 months of noticing. She thought about Cassie Brooks, 17 years old, asleep in her house on the west side of Flagstaff, with both locks on the door, and a federal agent parked on her street, not knowing that the night had just bent in her direction because 2 desperate young men had walked through the wrong door and found the right room. She thought sometimes things break the way they need to break. She picked up the coffee pot. She went back to work. The diner didn't empty until close to 1 in the morning. It happened gradually the way difficult nights end, not with a signal or an announcement, but with a slow, natural recession of urgency as the immediate danger passed, and the human body began quietly insisting on its own needs. Men settled their tabs. They said things to each other in the low, direct way of people who don't need to narrate what they've been through together because they were all there for it. They put on their jackets. They went outside to their bikes. Jack stayed. Danny stayed. Phil stayed. Tom stayed. Carl stayed. 5 men in the corner of a diner at midnight, and the conversation they were having had shifted from crisis management to something quieter and more deliberate, the work of making sure the structure they'd built over the last 2 hours would hold through whatever came next. Ethan and Tyler stayed. They had nowhere else to go, and everyone in the room understood that without anyone saying it. Ethan was on his 3rd cup of coffee. Tyler had finished the peach pie. and was working on a second piece that Darlene had produced from somewhere without being asked, because Darlene ran on the instinct that a young man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week needed to eat, and she was not wrong. Megan stayed because she always closed on Thursdays, and because leaving was not something she was capable of tonight, not with the story still unfinished in the room. Brianna had gone home at midnight. Sadie had left at 11:30, having conducted herself throughout the entire evening with a composure that Megan intended to tell her about explicitly, because people should be told when they have done something well. Darlene was in the kitchen, cleaning the rhythmic sound of it, a kind of percussion under the low conversation on the floor. Raymond Hollis called Danny at 12:41. Danny listened for 2 minutes without speaking. His face did the thing it did when information was arriving that required processing before responding, a specific stillness, the kind that looks like patience but is actually very rapid internal calculation. When he hung up, he looked at Jack. Gerald Fitch was picked up at his home at 11:58. The booth received that. Consent search, Jack asked. Raymond said he agreed immediately, no resistance. Raymond's read is that Fitch has been waiting for this for months. Danny paused. Apparently he started talking before they finished showing him the warrant. Phil set his coffee cup down. Conscience or fear? Raymond thinks both. He said Fitch his word was hollow. Like whatever he'd told himself to make it okay had been getting quieter for a while, and tonight it just stopped. Ethan was listening. He'd moved from his booth at some point in the last hour and was sitting at the counter now, one stool from Tyler, close enough that their proximity was its own kind of statement. He heard the word hollow, and something moved across his face. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. The particular recognition of someone who has spent 6 months doing something they knew was wrong, and feeling the word that describes what that does to a person. He named Moreno directly, Jack asked. By name, by operation, by structure, Danny said. He gave Raymond the contact method, a specific phone number rotated monthly. He gave him the agreement, 20% of first-year collections on every client he referred. He gave him the names of 4 other people he'd referred over the past 3 years. Danny looked at the table. 4 in 3 years. Families. The diner was very quiet for a moment. Tyler said from the counter, did any of them have? Raymond didn't give details on the other cases, Danny said. He said it gently but without softening it beyond that, because Tyler deserved the straight answer. He's going to follow each one. Tyler nodded. He looked at his pie. He didn't take another bite. Ethan said Fitch is going to testify. That's Raymond's read, Danny said. Yes. So Moreno doesn't just get the storage facility evidence, Ethan said slowly. He gets a county employee who participated in the referral scheme testifying in open court. Yes. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then, 14 months Raymond's been building this. 14 months, Danny confirmed. And it comes together on a Thursday night in October because 2 idiots drove 12 miles out of town with guns and walked into the wrong diner. Nobody corrected the word idiots. Nobody needed to. Ethan had earned the right to say it about himself. Jack said, the right diner. Ethan looked at him. Something passed between them, not absolution, not exactly, but something in the neighborhood of it. The acknowledgement that a thing done badly can still lead somewhere worth arriving. Megan was wiping down the counter. She'd been wiping down the same section of counter for about 4 minutes because her hands needed something to do, while her mind worked through the specific quiet amazement of what the last 3 hours had produced from what had started as a gun pointed at her face and $342 in a register drawer. She thought about the morning she'd started the notebook. March, a Tuesday. The man in the blue jacket had been in booth 4, and something about the transaction she'd watched, the precise practice quality of the envelope exchange, the way both men checked the room at exactly the same moment before it happened, had activated something in her that she didn't have a good word for. Not fear, more like the feeling of recognizing a pattern that everyone around you has decided not to see. She'd bought the notebook on her lunch break. She'd written the first entry that afternoon. She'd told herself it was just a habit, just organizing her thoughts. She hadn't told herself the truth, which was that some part of her had understood from the first entry that she was building something, that the information had weight and direction, and someday it was going to land somewhere it could do something real. She just hadn't known the landing would look like this. Phil's phone buzzed at 1:15. He looked at it, then immediately looked at Jack with an expression that had urgency in it, controlled professional urgency, the kind that moves fast without making noise. Storage facility, Wi-Fi, Phil said. Jack straightened. Raymond's surveillance team picked up movement. A vehicle matching the description of the black SUV entered the facility property at 1:08. Phil was reading as he spoke. They're running the plate now. If it matches, they moved tonight, Danny said. Why would they move tonight? Because the boys didn't show, Tom said. He'd been so quiet for the past hour that his voice had the effect of a door opening. Moreno's people came through the lot twice. They know something went wrong. They're not waiting for a scheduled collection. They're going to the facility to move assets. Jack understood it at the same time Tom said it. They think they're being watched, not because of tonight specifically, because Fitch getting picked up triggered something. Fitch made a call, Phil said. He was reading his phone. Raymond just confirmed Fitch's phone records show an outgoing call at 11:47, 11 minutes before the agents arrived at his house. One call, 63 seconds. He warned them, Danny said. He warned someone, Phil said. Raymond doesn't know who yet, but whoever got that call had enough time to make decisions. The table went very still. Ethan's voice came from the counter, tight and fast. If they're moving assets and they know the collection didn't happen, they're going to assume Tyler and I are the reason. Whether we talked or not doesn't matter. We're the loose end. He paused. They know where Tyler's family lives. Jack was already looking at Danny. Danny was already on the phone to Raymond. The conversation took 45 seconds, and Danny's side of it was 4 words and 1 number. Cassie Brooks, right now. Then he listened. Then he said, thank you. Then he hung up. Raymond's agent is still on the street, Danny said. He's repositioning to the front of the house. 2 more units are being dispatched. He looked at Tyler. She's covered. She's not a loose end they can reach tonight. Tyler's whole body had gone rigid when Ethan said the word family, and now it went through the slow physical process of releasing that rigidity like a cable under tension, being carefully walked back. This has to end tonight, Tyler said. His voice was different now. Not the raw desperation of the early hours of the evening. Something harder and clearer than that. Whatever Raymond is doing at that facility, it has to end tonight. I can't do another night of this. You won't have to, Jack said. You don't know. Tyler. Jack's voice had the quiet, absolute quality it carried when he was stating facts rather than offering comfort. Raymond has a surveillance team on the facility. He has a witness in custody who is actively cooperating. He has 7 months of documented transactions, a confirmed county insider, and a live vehicle on the property of the primary operations site while his team is in position. He paused. This is the best moment this case has had in 14 months. Raymond knows it. He's moving. As if in confirmation of that, Danny's phone lit up. He answered it. He listened for 20 seconds. His face broke into an expression that Megan had not seen on it all night. Not relief, exactly something more specific. The expression of someone watching something they've been building finally stand on its own. Raymond's team is executing, Danny said. They've got probable cause from the vehicle, the movement on the property, and the connection to Fitch's warning call. They're going in. He looked around the table. Right now. Nobody cheered. That wasn't how these men received news. They received it the way they'd received everything else tonight, with stillness, with the internal adjustment of people integrating new information into an ongoing assessment. But something changed in the room. The specific quality of the tension that had been present since 9:47, the live wire anything could happen tension of a situation with too many open variables, shifted into something different. Something that had a direction and an endpoint. Ethan got off his stool. He walked to the window. He stood there with his arms at his sides and looked out at the parking lot and the dark highway beyond it, and he stayed there for a long moment. Tyler stayed at the counter. He put both hands flat on the formica. He breathed. Megan watched both of them and felt the specific human weight of what it meant to be 22 years old and 20 years old at the end of a night like this, what it meant to have arrived at a place where the thing that had been crushing you for 6 months was finally in someone else's hands and moving toward its end. She thought it probably felt less like triumph than like the moment after a fever breaks. Not good yet, not all the way, but the direction had changed. The direction had unmistakably, irrevocably changed. It was 2:47 in the morning when Danny's phone rang with Raymond Hollis on the other end of it for the last time that night. Danny listened. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, all of them. He listened. Then he said, "The man himself." He listened. Then he set the phone on the table face up and looked at Jack. Victor Moreno was at the facility, Danny said, in person. Raymond's team took him into custody at 2:39, along with 4 associates and a complete record of the operation loan documents, collection logs, cash, a second ledger that Raymond says is going to take his forensic accounting team a month to fully process. He paused. "It's over." The booth was silent. Tom Garrett exhaled slowly through his nose. Carl Briggs, who had come back inside at some point in the last hour, put both hands on the counter and leaned on them. Phil set his phone face down with the deliberate motion of a man completing a task. Jack Morrison looked at his coffee cup. It was empty. He looked at Megan. She picked up the pot. She poured. He wrapped his hands around the cup. He looked at it for a moment, the way people look at something ordinary when they've just come through something extraordinary. And the ordinary thing is in that specific moment the most welcome thing in the world. Tyler said, "He's arrested." "Yes," Danny said. "Moreno is actually arrested. In custody as of 2:39 this morning." Tyler put his face in his hands. This time it wasn't the desperate suppression of earlier in the night. It was the full, complete, uncomplicated release of someone who has been holding something impossible and has finally been allowed to put it down. His shoulders shook once, just once. Then he steadied. Ethan had turned from the window. He was looking at Tyler. He walked back to the counter and sat down beside him and put his hand on the back of Tyler's neck, the way you do with someone you have known since you were 8 years old, and words are too slow for what you need to say. Neither of them spoke for a minute. Then Tyler said, 11 days. Ethan looked at him. From tonight to the arrest, Raymond said he'd move fast, right? How fast do you think? Tyler looked at Danny. Danny looked at Raymond's last message on his phone. He didn't give a timeline tonight, but with what he has, he did a brief, honest calculation. I'd expect an arraignment within the week. The evidentiary package is essentially complete. Fitch cooperating the facility records the surveillance documentation. He paused. I'd guess 11 days, maybe less. Tyler nodded slowly. 11 days, he said again, like he was testing the weight of it, like the specific smallness of the number after 6 months of a problem that had felt permanent and expanding and unsurvivable was something he needed to say out loud to believe. It would be 11 days. Raymond Hollis moved in the way Danny had described, not quickly but correctly. The arraignment came on the 9th day. The federal charges extortion, conspiracy, money laundering, and 4 counts related to the specific cases Gerald Fitch had referred were filed with the kind of documented precision that comes from 14 months of careful investigation, finding its missing pieces in a single night. But that was later. That was the future still organizing itself in the dark, while the Coyote Ridge Diner held its late-night quad and the coffee stayed hot. What happened in the diner was this. At 3 a.m, Jack Morrison stood up from the corner booth. He put on his jacket. He looked at Ethan Parker, and he said, "You're going to call Raymond Hollis's office at 9 o'clock this morning. Danny will give you the direct number. You'll tell them you're ready to give your statement. You'll bring Tyler. You'll tell everything you told me in the same order with the same clarity. You'll answer every question they ask." He paused. "And then you're going to go build something better than what you had before tonight. Both of you, that's not a suggestion." Ethan looked at him for a long moment. "Why do you care?" Ethan said. Not hostile, genuinely asking. Jack picked up his jacket. He thought about it, actually thought about it, the way a man thinks when he's trying to locate an honest answer instead of a convenient one. "Because you made a bad decision for the right reason," he said finally. "And then you made about 15 good decisions in a row under circumstances that would have broken most people. That tells me something about who you are. I'd rather that person exist in the world than not." He looked at Tyler too. "Both of you." He put $40 on the table, double what the bill would have been, and he walked to the door and he stopped. He looked at Megan. 9 years, he said. She knew what he meant. 9 years of coffee and Pia and October charity rides and the specific accumulated trust of being known by the same people in the same place for long enough that they become something like family without anyone signing paperwork. "Same time next October," she said. He nodded. He pushed the door open. He went out into the dark. Danny and Phil and Tom and Carl followed him one by one, each of them stopping to say something, brief to Megan, a nod, a word. The compressed communication of people who have been through something together and know that the language for it will come later, if at all. The parking lot filled briefly with the sound of engines, 41 Harleys turning over in sequence, the deep particular sound of it that Megan had been hearing every October for 9 years, and which she had never once gotten tired of. Then the sound moved, spread across the highway, and faded into the northern Arizona dark. The Coyote Ridge Diner was quiet. Ethan and Tyler sat at the counter. Megan stood behind it. Darlene had come out of the kitchen somewhere in the last 20 minutes and was sitting in one of the booths with her shoes off and a cup of tea, having earned the right to sit down. Nobody spoke for a while. The silence was the good kind, the earned kind. Then Tyler said, "Ms. Carter." She looked at him. "The notebook," he said. "It's 7 months. You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said. "Why did you?" She thought about it the way Jack had thought about his answer, looking for the true one instead of the easy one. "Because something was happening that was wrong," she said. "And looking away felt worse than doing something, even if I didn't know what the something was for yet." Tyler nodded slowly. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. "I'm going to get her something," he said. "Cassie, something for her birthday. It's in 3 weeks. I forgot. I've been so inside this thing for so long that I forgot her birthday is in 3 weeks." "What is she like?" Megan asked. "Books," Tyler said. "She reads everything. She wants to study literature in college." He stopped. "She's going to be able to go to college now. Our dad's getting better and the debt is gone and she's going to be able to go." He said it like he was discovering it in real time, the future reassembling itself into a shape that included possibilities he'd stopped letting himself imagine. Megan smiled. She couldn't help it. "Get her a good one," she said. "The books you remember are always the ones someone gave you." At 9 o'clock that morning, Ethan Parker called Raymond Hollis's direct line. Tyler sat next to him when he made the call. Raymond answered on the first ring, which told them everything they needed to know about how seriously he was treating what the night had produced. The statement took 3 hours. Raymond asked good questions. Ethan and Tyler answered every one. 11 days later, Victor Moreno was arraigned on federal charges in a Phoenix courthouse. Gerald Fitch entered a cooperation agreement the same morning. The storage facility records 2 full boxes of loan documents, collection logs, and a secondary ledger that Raymond's forensic team described as comprehensive to the point of self-incriminating, formed the backbone of a case that prosecutors said was the strongest financial extortion indictment filed in the district in 7 years. Cassie Brooks turned 18 3 weeks after the arrest. Tyler gave her a copy of a novel she'd been wanting for months. She didn't know that birthday the full shape of what her brother had carried to keep her safe. He would tell her eventually. Not yet. First, he let her just be 18, just be a girl who got a book she wanted from her brother who loved her. Just be that simple and that good. Megan kept working at the Coyote Ridge. She kept closing on Thursdays. She bought a new composition notebook in November, not because she expected to need it, but because the habit of paying attention was not something she intended to stop. You write things down because things matter, because the world is full of information that someone needs, and the difference between it meaning something and meaning nothing is whether someone was paying enough attention to catch it and careful enough to keep it. She kept the old notebook. She thought about having it framed and decided that was too dramatic. She put it on the shelf above her kitchen sink, where she kept the things she wanted to see every day. A photograph of her mother, a coffee mug that said something she'd long stopped reading, but liked the shape of, and a black and white composition notebook that had cost 99 cents and helped bring down a predator who had been grinding families into dust for 3 years. Every October, 41 motorcycles came back to the Coyote Ridge Diner. Every October, Jack Morrison sat in the corner booth and drank his coffee black and ate his apple pie and tipped the way a man tips when he understands the value of the work being done. Every October, Megan refilled his cup without being asked, and they talked the way people talk who share a specific private knowledge of what the room they're standing in is capable of when it has to be. The Coyote Ridge held. The coffee stayed hot. The people who came through the door looking for something found it food warmth an hour away from whatever was waiting for them outside, or on one particular Thursday night in October, something considerably more than that. Some rooms are just rooms, and some rooms are exactly what you need them to be, at exactly the moment you need them to be it, and the difference has nothing to do with the walls and everything to do with who is inside them and what they are willing to do for each other when it matters. The Coyote Ridge Diner was that kind of room. It always had been. It always would be. And that in the end was the only kind of justice that lasts, the kind built quietly daily by ordinary people who decide that paying attention is not optional and that the person standing next to them is worth protecting. That decision made again and again in the small hours of difficult nights is what holds the world together. That decision is what held it together that night.